today in Rich in Relationship. We're going to talk about
How you learned to connect with people as a child is actually sabotaging your connection to your marriage today. Did you know that your first relationships in childhood created a blueprint for how you connect with others today? Understanding how your childhood shaped your connection patterns will transform the way you look at your partner. Welcome to another episode of Rich in Relationship. I'm your host, Rich Heller, and today we're talking about how patterns of connection from your childhood are sabotaging your marriage. We're going to talk about something we've talked about before on Rich in Relationship, attachment styles. That's like the way we learn to connect as children and how it shows up in our adult relationships and how it actually starts to get in the way. And signs of this are going to be having the same fight over and over, or a fight feeling like deja vu. We're going to talk about this in depth today. Do you ever feel like you're speaking different languages in your marriage? Like you're stuck in a cycle of frustration, maybe emotional distance? It's probably because you've got a conflict of attachment styles, the way you both learned how to attach as children. And it seems like, well, attachment's attachment, right? If they want to attach and I want to attach, then why is there a conflict? But it's kind of like the way that you want to attach does something that scares, drives away, or puts off the other person. And then in fear, they express the way they want to attach, which triggers something less than positive in you. Understanding how your childhood shaped your connection patterns will transform the way you look at your partner. It will change the way you look at conflict, and it will set the foundation for deeper intimacy. Or for some of you, it'll set the foundation for the beginning of intimacy. Did you know that your first relationships in childhood created a blueprint for how you connect with others today? That's right. The first 0 to 7 years of our life are when our unconscious mind, the operating system for how we move through the world, is created. And part of that operating system is, how do we connect with people? How do we bond with, what's the way that we bond with others? There are 4 basic attachment styles as defined by psychology. There's first what's called secure attachment, which is approximately 50% of the people. These are people who are comfortable with being vulnerable. They're able to depend on others while maintaining their own sense of independence. That should be all of us, right? But these are people who feel confident giving and receiving love, and they tend to thrive in relationships. And we can, by the way, I want to be really clear. The way that we learn how to attach in our childhood is not necessarily a sentence to connect that way for the rest of our lives. We can all become more securely attached. Next group is anxious attachment. That's approximately 20% of the population. These are people who are they're a little afraid of being abandoned. They're anxious about the future. They have anxiety about connection. They meet someone, they connect with them, but they're a little anxious about it. Maybe they're going to leave me, and they need constant reassurance. Another metaphor would be, these are people who have a love cup. There might be a little hole in the bottom of the cup, and so it needs to be constantly refilled to placate that anxiety. They crave closeness, but they often worry that they'll lose it. Then there's avoidant attachment. This is another 20, maybe 25% of the people. These people are emotionally self-reliant, and they're uncomfortable with intimacy, right? They're much more comfortable with themselves than they are revealing themselves. Avoidant individuals value independence over connection, which can come off as aloofness. And then fourth is disorganized attachment, which is about 10% of the population. It's a mix of anxious and avoidant traits. It's sort of the two groups that are concerned with attachment melded together, and it's often a result of trauma or inconsistent caregiving. Disorganized individuals long for connection, but also fear it, creating a confusing push-pull dynamic. All right, so those are the categories of attachment. Now, there's not a lot of statistics out there on whether secure people marry secure people, or anxious with avoidant, or disorganized with anxious. And truthfully, since 50% of marriages end in divorce, right, it can't be that the secure people are married to secure people, right? If half the people have secure attachment, then you would think that 25% of the population, that if they were marrying each other, 25% of marriages would be secure, and the 75% would be at risk. Guess that's possible. Right? I guess that's possible. But 50% of marriages fail, and no one's really sure. No studies have been done on yet on how attachment theory impacts that. What we want to focus on next is what what are the flavors of arguments? What happens in the different dynamics? So what I'm going to give you here is a frame where maybe you can identify where are you and where's your partner in terms of attachment. Because when you mix these things up, conflict can become very destructive instead of constructive. Do you ever wonder why some arguments feel impossible to resolve? Your attachment style and their attachment style probably holds the answer. So, anxious conflicts are when people are always seeking reassurance. They feel that feel over they fe- Their partners feel overwhelmed by their need for reassurance. Do you really love me? Why didn't you text me back? Why don't you care about me? It creates a cycle where the anxious partner seeks more attention. Avoidant attachment conflicts, those folks tend to withdraw when things get difficult and can lead to feelings of rejection. So just imagine you've got an anxious person married to an avoidant person. The anxious person gets insecure for a moment and they say, "Hey, do you really love me?" The avoidant person gets scared and withdraws. And the more the avoidant person withdraws, the more the anxious person drives forward. And the more they drive forward, the more the avoidant person withdraws. Right? This is actually a very common dynamic with couples that I've worked with in the past. Disorganized attachment conflicts have both qualities. So it might go something like, "Why are you smothering me? Hey, don't leave me alone." It's like a push me, pull you. There's confusion and instability for both partners. When there's a secure attachment person in the relationship, they can act as a stabilizer. They'll help to de-escalate conflicts. But secure partners will often feel drained when paired with insecure styles. Why do some arguments feel like they spiral out of control? Attachment style often triggers this out of control feeling. I already shared with you anxious and avoidant, how that can just grow and grow. When you have avoidant with avoidant, you have the same potential. Both partners just shut down. Anxious and avoidant, one is seeking reassurance, the other one's withdrawing. Seeking reassurance, withdrawing. When you have avoidant with avoidant, both partners are just avoiding. They're just quiet. They're just in their own individual worlds, and it leads to emotional stagnation. When you have anxious and anxious, there's an overdependence, which creates a fragile, high pressure connection, which can disintegrate very quickly and explode very quickly. But when you've got disorganized with any style, the push pull behaviors destabilize the relationship further. The good news, your attachment style is not a life sentence. It's a starting point for change. We can overcome the programming of our childhood. We can transform it so that it works. Once we understand what our programming is, we have the opportunity to change it. We do a ton of work with people training their unconscious mind to release old patterns that aren't working for them so that they can incorporate new patterns that do. First, you need to recognize your style. Take a quiz or reflect on your childhood experiences to identify your attachment tendencies. Maybe you've been listening to this podcast and you've gotten a sense of that already. Ask yourself, when do I feel most insecure in my relationship and how do I respond? Do I feel most insecure when someone's avoiding me? Do I feel most insecure when someone's giving me love? How do I respond? Do I pull away? Do I move towards? What do I do? Work on emotional regulation. If you've got anxiety, as a short-term solution, practice self-soothing and mindfulness to reduce dependency on reassurance. Work on your self-talk. When you hear that little voice saying, "Oh, nobody really cares for me," recognize it and reassure it. Tell that voice, I care for you. We don't need to get our love from someone else. I love you. I care for you. That anxiety is founded in a part of yourself that didn't get its needs met when it was really important. And the only person who can meet that part's needs is you, your higher true self. If you're avoidant, experiment with sharing small vulnerabilities in safe settings. Experiment with cuddling a little. Try just being a little more present. Very often people who are avoidant grew up in households either that were very scary, so they were avoiding what they were afraid of, or they grew up in households where being close just wasn't part of the mix. They may have been well clothed, well fed, well nurtured in every other way, but emotionally just not very nurtured. And people who are avoidant can learn to be more connected in small increments. If you're disorganized, it's vital that you seek consistency in self-care and partner communication, right? If you're anxious and avoidant, all right, you need to take care of both sides. Here, super important, collaborate with your partner. Create a shared language around the need that your attachment style expresses and foster empathy. For example, hey, honey, when I feel anxious, I'm working on self-soothing instead of asking you to reassure me constantly. And I would love your support with that. I don't need you to reassure me. I need you to remind me this is a good time for me to soothe myself, that I can't be dependent on you for everything. Big picture, if you're having trouble shaking this pattern, give us a call. Here at Rich in Relationship, we've got this amazing mental and emotional release process, which helps your unconscious mind to find when that pattern started, learn what it needs to learn, release it, and move forward in a secure connection, a secure attachment style. If unresolved patterns for your past are sabotaging your relationship, you don't have to stay stuck in the same cycle. By understanding what's going on, where you're coming from, who put this in you, and working together, you can rewrite your relationship story. Go to richinrelationship.com for tools and exercises to break free from attachment conflicts and build a thriving relationship. Use me. Next episode. I forgot we're a twice a week podcast. Why do we hurt the ones we love? Stay tuned. And in the meantime, have a wonderful day and an amazing tomorrow.